Hello, and welcome back to Mini Adventures Mini. So this week I'm getting back into some of my D&D mini painting. As with like the Hill Giant I did a few weeks ago, I was trolling around the store and I found a miniature that I really liked and I wanted to paint. It's a surprisingly simple miniature, but it was a lot of fun to paint, and I've never had a miniature like this, so I thought it would be fun to paint up for my collection. So I decided I wanted to share that with you guys, so I've gone ahead and recorded it, so we'll go ahead and jump into the painting now. Alright, and here we have our pre-images for this miniature. It's this cool WizKids shark that I managed to find, and as you saw, it comes in two pieces with the shark bursting up out of the water with the cool water effects surrounding him, and then just the smaller one with just the fin popping up out of the water, which I thought was kind of cool and should show itself well on some designs and whatnot. So coming in here, I start off using my X-Acto knife just to peel off some of these mold lines and clean it up as best as I can. This join here at the jaw line is a little difficult, so I smooth it out as much as I can. But going on to the painting, I start off with these four colors, the three gradients of gray and my off-white color. And I start with my darkest color and just start layering it on here. As you can see, it doesn't go on this pale primer that these come on with super well, but it's a lot easier to get darks on in a few coats than it is to get whites. You usually have to do 2 or 3 times as many coats putting a white onto a dark color than you do at putting a dark color onto a light color. But either way, going from one extreme to the other tends to require several layers, as it tends to try and show through quite a bit. But you can see here it's already darkening up quite a bit, and I'm just applying it, going down. I used some reference images to get roughly what I needed, and I've just got this hard separation line between the top of the shark and its belly. Here I'm using this mummy white just so that it's not the original primer color. This looks a little bit more natural to me, so I just go ahead and put a few coats of that on there in order to make it look a bit more natural than what I had before. And again, just keep putting layers of that dark gray on there until I get my solid base coat. Just referencing images online, I found out where I needed to put my gray, so it's on the front of the fins but not the bottoms, and I'll go back and touch it up here and there just to try and get everything right where I want it to be. And then I heavily thin down the next couple colors, the brighter colors of gray, my uniform gray and my ash gray, just so that I can apply them in more of a glaze type texture and just feather the coloring out. Just lay it out, I'm just putting the color on, and then I'll clean off the brush and maybe still have it a little bit damp, and I'll use that on the edge to just kind of soften it. And I'm not doing this like a true glaze, it's not quite that thin. I didn't need as many coats to get the color I was looking for. This is just a quick and dirty version of glazing that gets the effective gradient that I'm looking for without having to put quite as much time and effort into the process. And I actually brighten up my darker gray a little bit here for the underside because I thought it ended up looking a little bit too dark, so I try to brighten it up just a little bit, but not too much. So I struggled with that a little bit, so I make it just a little bit brighter. And that's what most of the complexity came out with doing this, is I knew this was just going to be a simple gray and white color scheme, but I tried to get as smooth and prominent a gradient as I could from the light to the dark areas on this shark, because I thought that would be where I would get to show off my painting skills the most. And then for the water effect, I just go ahead and take this indigo wash, it's one of my homemade washes, and I apply it all over the miniature. Well, not all over the miniature, all over the water effects on this miniature, and even let it try and pool on the bottom of the base a little bit just to get as much of a water effect as possible. And I'll work on some other stuff while I'm trying to let that dry. I need to let that dry as much as possible. And you can see here I'm starting to use a little bit of the ash gray just as the highest points to get the best highlight I can there, but nothing too crazy. And then while I'm letting that dry, I also come over here and work a little bit on this little fin coming out, but not too much. And I pull out this centaur skin, which is a very pale pink. With the reference images I'd looked at, shark mouths are typically just this very pale pink. They don't get like a lot of red. And that might just be an effect of the water, but I decided to stick with it since I thought it would look the most realistic under these circumstances. So that requires a few coats. I actually thinned that one down probably more than I had wanted to, but I still basically get what I'm looking for. And then I go ahead and use some matte black here just to fill in the eyes. You can't really see any sclera or pupil on the eyes. And I'm sorry I get this out of focus a little bit, but I pulled in some of my homemade black wash, and I'm just carefully applying it in the crevices here between the shark's gills so that they show out as black, but so that I don't get any pooling in weird places. And also highlighting on the fin just to get that all straight away, touching up the mouth a little bit more. Here I'm using some skeleton bone on the teeth, and just getting that in nice and solid. I don't use my normal staining technique on these teeth like I normally do. I decided to keep them more of a pristine bone color since they're underwater all the time. It seemed more natural to me. And lastly, I take some matte white here, and I just dry brush that onto all of the frothy bits on this water. And that's really the final step that you really need. It's just kind of a heavy application of some blue wash and some of this white dry brushing to get kind of the foamy effect. I also use a little bit of my mummy robes there to do a little bit of a reflective point on the eye there. And my last step is to use some gloss varnish instead of my normal matte varnish to cover everything. And this will make it at the end look wet and glossy. Specifically, I'm going for that wet effect, as you can see here in the final images. It really does make it look like it just burst out of the water, and it's still shiny and reflective from being all wet. And the water is the same way as well. So it really gives that effect very well. So I'm pretty satisfied with the way that that turned out. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I had a lot of fun painting this one. I know it's a fairly simple miniature, but I tried to put as much depth into it as I could with this kind of setup, and I think it came out looking pretty neat. There's a few things I might tweak if I try to do like water effects like that in the future, but nothing too drastic. That's the basic methodology I would probably stick with going forward. But it was pretty fun for me, so if you guys enjoyed it, please go ahead and give me a like. That does help out a lot. If you have anything to say to me, put it in the comment section down below. And if you want to catch any of my future videos, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get notified whenever any of my future videos get put up. In addition, you can also go check out my Etsy store if you're interested, where I put up some of the miniatures that I paint for sale, several of which I've done videos on. And you can also take a look at my Patreon page if you want to support me in a different way. All those will be linked down in the description. And with that, I hope to see everybody here again next week.